All statements and opinions expressed by guests of this podcast are not representative of the Orthochat, its host, or its producers, and should not be associated with the podcast unless explicitly stated by the host.
You are listening to the Orthochat by Yanni Katsadas.
Σιγαργατάκησε όλος τη αμαρτία και παρεδόθης τελείως τη ραθυμία της εξαναστήσης σε κείμενο.
Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ελέησον, 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 Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ελέησον. Greetings in Christ, brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 23 of the Orthochat. We are here today with Father Gregory Edwards. Father, how are you?
I'm well, thank God. How are you?
Things are pushing, they're moving. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on that's all positive and productive. So we'll put it that way. Would you like to start us off with a prayer?
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Glory to thee, our God, glory to thee, O heavenly King, comforter of the Spirit of truth, who art in all places and fillest all things, treasury of good things and giver of life, come and abide in us, and cleanse us from every stain, and save our souls, O good one. Amen.
Amen. So, before we get started with all the stuff, what's new? What's the word?
What's new? Well, I don't know when this podcast will air, but we're in the middle of Lent, and so we're in that part of Lent where at least I found that first couple weeks of Lent you make a good start, and then after maybe 2-3 weeks, you kind of hit a wall at a certain point. It gets a little bit tougher sledding, but thank God everything's going well. Actually, I don't have any complaints.
Thank God. I mean, you start to, I know exactly what you mean, because you start to feel it after the first couple weeks. You're just like, oh man,
Yeah.
what I wouldn't get. I mean, not even that. It's like, yes, what I wouldn't do for like a smash burger with like some fries and a strawberry milkshake. But at the same time, it's like, man, the spiritual life ramps up during this time.
Yes.
It's not peaches and cream front to back. So it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I have one friend from my old parish in Florida. We have this running joke where during Lent we text each other like the most seductive photos of hamburgers or that you can find.
If
just to tease each other.
there's this joint up in Cleveland. If you're ever around Cleveland, you got to hit up the Mongolian Grill, because the way they do things, they got like this big like flat grill thing where they just like they'll flip like noodles on it. They'll do like chicken
I
stuff
love
like
it.
that. Oh, it's so
Yeah.
good. And I haven't been in like 10 years, but it's like it's really good there. And then Permanis, obviously, it's like that. That's something else. Egg burger from Permanis would kill right now. But we'll wait till after the resurrection. So yeah.
I'm not familiar with that one. What is an egg burger?
Well, I mean, like you could realistically get it anywhere at like a sit down restaurant, but you just get like the way I do mine. I'll go to a restaurant and I'll tell them every meat you have, capicola, ham, bacon, whatever, put it all on a burger, get a sunny side up fried egg, put it right on top of there, get it with some pickles. It's my death row meal. I'll take it any day of the
Yeah.
week. Oh yeah.
That sounds really good right now, especially.
Oh yeah, they're crazy. And where I'm from in Greece, there's a restaurant called On the Road, and they have like 1 or 2 locations now, and they'll do that with like pickled beets. It's like insane. It's crazy.
Oh.
But
Which
yeah.
part of Greece are you from?
Kalimnos.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I was down in Newport Richey, Florida, which is right next to Tarpon Springs.
Oh
So
yeah. Our other breeding ground, our little congregation right there. So
it's little Kalimnos.
Yeah, Little Kalimnos. It's good there. That's Little Kalimnos. Youngstown's Little Kalimnos. What else? It's like some parts of New York, depending on where you're at. But it's we like being everywhere and letting everybody know that we're everywhere. So that's just kind of how we roll. But concerning your young life, we talked enough about my young. I'm 24. I'm not young anymore, but we'll talk about your young life now. Concerning your early life, tell us a little bit about it and what drew you during that time towards serving God in His church.
Oh, good question. Well, I would say I grew up Episcopalian. I was only child. Um, my parents had actually converted to Episcopalian from Methodist. It's not a big conversion, but still, it was something that they had. My dad, in particular, had really was interested in history. He was a history professor, not of church history, but anyway, he was interested in history, and so he had searched. He had done some research on churches, and he wanted one that had apostolic succession. He ended up at the Episcopalian Church. So anyway, that's how I was raised. But I wouldn't say that we went necessarily every Sunday. It depended. We moved quite a bit, so it depended on if we found a church that we connected with wherever we were living. So I remember one period where we were going to church pretty regularly, and I remember being an altar boy, and I probably was about 10 or 12 at the time. And I have one very distinct memory of being an altar boy and carrying the cross in the procession during the mass. And I remember that those crosses, they come in pieces that you screw together. And I was carrying the cross, and the whole bottom piece just fell off in the middle of the procession, and made this big clang. And I was like, should I keep going? Should I pick it up? And I just kept going.
That's funny. I
Pretended like it didn't happen.
I remember one time when I was little, oh man, I had to be like 11 or 12. It's like, on Holy Friday, how like all the altar boys like kneel like heads to the floor on both sides of the
Yeah.
on both sides in front of the altar. I remember, there were some people that were holding other stuff, but I was holding a candle, and I knelt down in such a way to where I lit the top of my head on fire, and I heard
Oh.
like this crispy, and I was like, what's that? And then I look up, and I was like, oh, that's fun. And I was holding like a little clump of my burnt up hair there, but it was, yeah, that stuck with me. So yeah.
Yeah. So I remember from that period of my life, thinking about God. Let me think. I mean, there wasn't really any thought about, a calling at that point, but I remember thinking seriously about God for the first time, probably, so maybe 10 or 12. But then when I got to, I would say 15 years old in high school, by that time we hadn't been going to a church for several years, and I just had decided that there was no use in church. That and yeah, I didn't see any usefulness in it. I considered myself smart, academic, intellectual, whatever you want to say, and so I just decided, well, I just don't have any use for religion, and I was an atheist, really, like not just agnostic, but actually an atheist. So that continued through high school until I went to college. I went to a very liberal progressive college, where those views weren't challenged in any way, my atheist views. And I took we had a lot of freedom in what classes we took, so I took a philosophy class, and we read Nietzsche, and I was really eating that up. um and there was during college, I was probably uh well, at a certain point, I had like this existential crisis in college where I just didn't really know what the purpose and meaning of my life was anymore. I mean, I had focused probably at trying to please my parents. I had focused on academics and gotten into a good school, good college, and I guess I was following the American dream of, having a big car and a big house, and I just it all kind of came crashing in on me, like, is this really what I want? What I've been working all this time for what? Something I don't
Like, is
even
this
want.
really it? Like,
Yeah, is this it? And it really reached a kind of crisis point where I was in a kind of despair, I would say. And and anyway, and I was probably living a little too wild, enjoying my freedom in college. And at a certain point, and some friends who were religious had told me, you really you should pray, you should ask, you should turn to God. And I was like, yeah, no, I have no use for that. And I completely dismissed them. But I guess in the back of my mind that they had planted a seed, because when I reached a certain point of desperation, I remember, and I don't remember formulating like a plan or thought to do this. It just happened that I kind of fell to my knees in my dorm room on my bed, kneeling against my bed, and I prayed. I offered some kind of atheist's prayer of, God, if you're out there, help me, speak to me, give me direction. And I didn't see any white light or anything like that. There was no kind of supernatural phenomenon, but from that point on, my life totally changed. And it started to kind of manifest itself in the following days and weeks that I just was starting to try to live a different way of life. And so I became really interested in religion. And so I changed my major to study religion, because that's really all I was curious about, because I'd had this experience, something in me had changed. I had some kind of encounter with a higher power. And I wanted to know who it is. How can I get more of this? How can I deepen this experience? So I started studying, and I started going back to, there was a local Episcopal church, which was a kind of high church. It was called, everyone called it Smoky Steve's, St. Stephen's, but it had lots of bells and smells, as they say. And I started going back to that church, it was something. It gave me a grounding. But I was reading, there was something there, but it didn't correspond exactly to my experience. It wasn't exactly what I was looking for. And I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew that that wasn't quite it. And so I became really interested in Buddhism actually for a while. But I was also taking history of Christianity class. And at the same time, I had this kind of, that's when the call first happened, where I felt a kind of call to serve in ministry. So it all kind of happened around the same time. And as I was thinking about, I was probably trying to remember now. I think I was a junior in college at the time. And so I was starting to think about, what am I going to do post graduation? And one thought was, I'd really like to go to seminary to continue, because all I wanted to do was read about theology. And so I thought, well, what better place to do that than go to seminary? So I went to the priest of the Episcopal Church there, and I asked him, would you support me? Would you give me a recommendation and support me to go to seminary? And he said, yes, we would. He said, but there's a problem. And I said, what's that? He said, well, our bishop here, the Episcopalian bishop of Rhode Island, where I was, is a woman, and I don't believe that she has any grace. And he said, he said, your parents live in Florida. There's a good bishop there in Fort Lauderdale. You should go through their parish so that you can be ordained eventually by him, who has grace. And I was like, oh, okay. And so, I was kind of confused by the whole conversation, because part of me was saying, I wasn't very sophisticated theologically, but I knew enough to say, well, if your bishop doesn't have grace,
then how do you?
Yeah, then how do you, right? So isn't that a problem? Then don't you see that as a problem? Because he didn't seem to see it as a problem for him. And that was kind of a hum moment. And then around the same time, I was taking this history of Christianity class. We were actually doing 2 semesters, full year on the 7 ecumenical councils. And we were reading at one point some primary documents from the 5th century that was happened to be describing Christian worship at the time. And I remember just being fascinated by it because I always liked history as well as my dad. And so I remember being fascinated by this and thinking, huh, that's interesting. And then kind of kind of comparing it with what was going on in the Episcopal Church at the time, because there was a lot of turmoil in the Episcopal Church. There was a lot of change happening, ordination of an openly homosexual bishop, and continued arguments about what prayer book they were going to use, etc. Modernizing the prayer book, and people splitting off because of that. And so this picture of early Christian worship kind of appealed to me, like, this is what it was like. And she said at the professor at the end of the class, as everyone was leaving, she said, "Oh, and by the way, if anybody wants to see the worship we read about today, you can go to a Greek Orthodox church." And I said, "What? What did she say?" I kind of was taken aback that this actually still exists. So what is this Orthodox Church of which you speak? I had never even heard of it. Um, so I thought, I kind of filed that away in the back of my brain. Thinking though at the time, like, well, there's probably no Orthodox church anywhere around here. Maybe there's one in New York or something. And then a few days later, I met my now wife, and when we met, like, I was just always discussing with people religion. And so shortly into our conversation, I asked, are you religious? Are you spiritual? And she said, yes, I'm Greek Orthodox. And I said, get out of here. I just heard about Greek Orthodox for the first time, and now I meet somebody. And I said, well, where do you go to church? And she said, there's a church 10 minutes from here. I go there every Sunday, and you can come with me if you want. And I said, I'll take you up on that. So the next Sunday I went with her to church, and sure enough, my Christianity professor was there chanting at the church. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So here's someone who's an expert on Christian history, and she's Orthodox. And come to find out that she had converted to Orthodoxy in her graduate studies. So, that's how I became Orthodox. So I started meeting with the priest, and I was catechized for a year, and then I was received into the church, and my professor ended up being my godmother. Um, and but that calling that I had even when I was Episcopalian, that feeling like I want to continue studying this stuff, right? I want and this feeling like I wanted to serve, I wanted to serve people. I felt like that was the meaning that it was missing in my life. So I was still thinking it, but the priest that catechized me and received me into the church, he said, well, you're just Orthodox. It's too soon to go to seminary. You need some time to mature. And so I said, what am I going to do? So because I wanted to keep studying, I found a master's program in religion, early Christianity, that I said I got accepted to, and I got a stipend to be a teaching assistant, graduate student assistant there. So I said, okay, I'll do that for 2.5 years, and then after that we'll reassess, and maybe then I can go to seminary. So I did that 2.5 years. Then my wife and I were talking about actually being missionaries. Was what both of us had a feeling, a calling to be missionaries. So we talked with OCMC, and the Orthodox Christian Mission Center, and they said, well, we'd love to support you, but part of the problem is you're going to have to develop your own means of support. and you have both have student debt, it's going to make it very difficult for you to be able to support yourselves until you retire that debt. So then that led us to start thinking about, led us to AmeriCorps. And both of us did AmeriCorps for a year after I did my master's degree. And
What's AmeriCorps?
okay, so AmeriCorps is like Peace Corps. It's run by the federal government, but whereas Peace Corps focuses on foreign countries, AmeriCorps you serve domestically within the United States. So we were both assigned to serve in Spokane, Washington, Eastern Washington, which is where my wife was from, Washington State. And her brother-in-law was a priest at a new mission church in Spokane. So we said this is a good opportunity. I was assigned to a food kitchen project. She was assigned to Habitat for Humanity, and we were able to help a lot with the mission my brother-in-law had. So we did that for a year, and still I'm thinking I want to go to seminary. I want to go to seminary, but after master's degree and the missionary thing didn't work out, my spiritual father at the time still said, it's kind of early, you need more time. So we did America for a year, and still over all this time, this feeling of that I want to serve, I want to go into ministry, it wasn't going away. I kind of wanted it to go away, to be honest with you, because, um, you know, before all this had happened, I was planning to go to law school. And then after, especially after working at AmeriCorps for a year, which you live under the poverty line, they give you they give you food stamps. So you really live like the people that you're serving. And I started thinking, wow, maybe law school is not such a bad idea. It's such a bad idea because I'd be able to actually,
Not be on food stamps doing
not be on
that.
food
Yeah.
stamps. Yeah, that wasn't my dream. Uh, so I kind of wanted this calling to go away, but it wouldn't. It just persisted. And every time someone in the church would say, well, wait, I would say, okay, but it wouldn't go away. And I would just keep coming back and saying, now can I go? Now can I go? So at this time, while we were in Washington State, my brother-in-law was a priest in Spokane. My father-in-law was a priest in Yakima, Washington, which is central Washington. And he gave me the idea one day. He said, I was talking about going to seminary, and he said, well, I know this young man who went to Thessaloniki, Greece to study for seminary. Why don't you do that? And I said, why don't I do that? That's a good idea. And so I started pursuing it. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just started putting one foot in front of the other. And all these doors started opening. I met the right people at the right time. They gave me recommendations. Next thing I know, after some months of pursuing this and filling out a lot of Greek paperwork, a lot of Greek bureaucracy, I was accepted into University of Thessaloniki for a PhD program because I already had a master's. So yeah, so that's how I ended up going to seminary, so to speak, in Thessaloniki. um which yeah, I really felt like when my father-in-law said that, it really kind of it checked a box or something for me. It really connected for me because I felt like as a convert, and especially I was in this new mission parish, a convert parish in Spokane, really felt like as a convert, as a new convert, that something was missing. My entry into Orthodoxy was very academic, was very book driven. Um, and I just felt, and then hanging out with basically only other converts, it was just more of the same. And I felt like something was missing, like the lived part of Orthodoxy was really missing. That I didn't have a complete picture of Orthodoxy. And so something about going to Greece really appealed to me because it wasn't so much to study because at this point, I was kind of getting tired of studying. I wanted praxis. And so something about going to Greece appealed to me because I could live in an Orthodox culture. And that was really why we ended up going. So we bought one-way tickets, never had been to Greece, didn't speak Greek, fairly newly married couple, and we just moved to Thessaloniki. So that was like the beginning of my journey into kind of preparing for the priesthood.
Right. And did you eventually learn the Greek while you were living there, I'm assuming?
Yeah, the first year you have to all the foreigners who are there, you're kind of provisionally accepted into the university, provided that you learn Greek in the first year and you have to pass a Greek exam. So the first year you actually go to a school of modern Greek designed for foreigners. Um, and it's intense. It's like, grammar boot camp, you know, especially for Americans who we have a terrible reputation in Europe for languages, because in Europe, all my friends there who are from other countries in Europe, they all spoke 4 or 5 languages. And, here I was an American, I only knew English and I didn't even know the grammar of my own language really. So I had a much steeper curve to climb than they did. And a lot of Americans actually failed out of the Greek program. They weren't able to learn the language, but so it was a lot of hard work for a year, just full time dedicated to learning the modern Greek language. And I did manage to pass the exam and then started my PhD program.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, you lived in Greece for almost a decade, if not more, right?
Yeah, 10 years exactly.
Yeah, so I wanted you to tell us maybe a little bit about your time living in Greece and what positive experiences there still kind of stick with you. Because you said, once again, even though you accomplished so many things academically, you wanted more of the praxis. So, like, what did that look like while you were there?
Yeah, so it looked like so after a full year of studying, the language, I still didn't know the language well, but I had a rudimentary understanding of the language. And really what I was and to be honest with you, I kind of neglected my PhD studies because I was just enjoying living in an Orthodox culture, going to churches, visiting monasteries, being involved in the parish. Had a great spiritual father who was teaching me a lot. I had another priest who was a mentor to me and let me serve in the altar and like really learn the praxis of liturgics like and how to be a priest. I spent a lot of time with these two priests in particular and just kind of watched how they operated, and that was a great education for me. So that was real, and I was just really enjoying, I could live in Greece because I had a student visa, but I wasn't really, focusing so much time on my studies, to be honest with you. And then at a certain point, though, after an initial period of that, I realized like, okay, I need to decide, am I going to be serious about this or not? Like, am I actually going to finish what I started, or am I just going to kind of hang out here? So I decided, well, because I had people supporting me as well from back in the States, and I said, well, really, I owe it to them to actually do what I said I was going to do. So I finally started taking my studies seriously. And after only about a year in Greece, I was ordained a deacon. Um, and I was accepted into the Church of Greece. So I was a Greek civil employee. I was a federal employee of the Greek government because that's how the church and state operate. They pay for the clergy um, as part of a long-standing agreement in which the church gave the state some properties. So it's not like the government's just giving us free money. It's the church's money, but this is part of how it's structured. So I felt very fortunate. I was continuing my studies. I was serving as a deacon. I was learning a lot, both in my studies and in hanging out with other priests, serving in various parishes. And then after about 14 months, I was ordained a priest, at which time, when I was ordained, 2009, my wife was pregnant with triplets, our first kids. Uh,
Wow.
were then born in Greece. So that 2009 was a very busy year because I was really deeply working on my PhD, and I was a newly ordained priest in a foreign country, and I went from 0 kids to 3, you know. So that was a busy year. But I would say my time in Greece in general was probably the highlight of my life up to this point. All my kids were born there. And my best, yeah, I just enjoyed it so much. I feel like I grew so much in my orthodoxy. Um, to the point where I felt like looking back that I didn't know anything before I went there. You know, even though I'd read all these books, I didn't really know anything. Um, it was only by really kind of living the faith in an organic kind of way that I felt like I started to learn a little something about Orthodoxy. And I just had so many experiences and blessings with, I went to Mount Athos regularly. I've been there to Mount Athos probably 40 times. And that was a real blessing. And, just all the monasteries and the relics and the wonder working icons. We don't have anything like that here in the US. It's totally different.
Yeah, except for maybe St. Anthony's in Arizona.
Yeah.
That comes at least a little close, I would say.
Yes.
Um, but were there any particularly notable or saintly people that you met in your time there, like, in your visits to Mount Athos, traveling around Greece?
Yeah. Well, I mean, on Mount Athos, for instance, and I've continued to go see him when I visit Mount Athos. There's a Yeronda Gavril, and he's kind of considered he lives not far from where Saint Paisios lived, like a kind of a stone's throw, really. And he was widely considered the most holy man on Athos. So my one of my mentor priests brought me to Athos for the first time, took me to Yeronda Gavril. We spoke, and I continue to go to him. He's a figure I consider to be a holy man. But yeah, boy, there's so many people that looking back now, yeah, the really embodied the Orthodox faith for me and really modeled the Orthodox faith for me, not just priests and clergy and monks, but lay people. One thing I've always noticed after living in Greece for a while was, especially coming out of convert parishes, it was always a curiosity to me that, and I fell victim to this too, where I was tonsured a reader while we were serving this mission parish, and it seemed like in convert parishes, like every male who could draw breath was something in the church, was a reader, was a subdeacon, was whatever, and liked to wear the robes and everything. And then I noticed in Greece that it wasn't like that at all. In fact, there were all these young men who were dedicated to the church, went every week, but they felt no need or no call to become a priest, or they were very content to be a banker and be a pious Orthodox banker. And for me as a convert, I was like, I couldn't quite understand that. Like, if you really loved Orthodoxy, you would want to professionalize it. That was kind of my mentality. And I realized that was a very American mentality because, we're very utilitarian in our philosophy. It even comes out in what we ask each other when you first meet somebody. One of the first things we ask as Americans is, what do you do for a living? Right? What do you do? Right? It's all about what you do. And in Greece, I kind of learned though it's more about how to be. It's not about what you do. Which was a real paradigm shift for me. And made me question, really whether for the first time I started questioning, do I have the right motives for wanting to become a priest? And I remember I went to my spiritual father, and I would say he was a holy figure in my life. um, is. And I remember asking him, this is showing, this was less than a year being there. And I was about to be, on the process of being ordained a deacon. And I remember asking him, is it God's will for me to be a priest? And he said, he kind of laughed and he said, forget about God's will. And I said, what? And he said, forget about God's will. He said, God's fine. God doesn't need you to be a priest. He'll be fine whether you're a priest or whether you're not a priest. He says, what's your will? And I said, and I said, well, if I'm honest, my will is I want to be a priest. I feel like I've had this calling that I can't shake. And he said, well, may it be blessed. And it was such a different way of thinking, as an American, we want to know, what does God want me to do? Again, it's all about do. I want to know, I want God to draw me a plan of what exactly I'm supposed to do. And, being in Greece from these holy figures, I learned it's not so much what you do, it's how you exist, how you live. The tropos hyparxios, as Yanaras says. Your manner of being, your manner of existence. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And that's something I see all the time when I'm down there, that Orthodoxy isn't this thing that you that you have to make a professional aspect of yourself, but everybody overseas, whether you're in Serbia, Greece, Russia, whatever, institutionalizes it into their default, into their being. And I
Yeah.
have uncles that are construction workers there. I have aunts that are just stay-at-home moms. I have plenty of cousins and friends and family that don't make their orthodoxy into something they have to they have to actively be a part of something else to do, but it's just who they are. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's something that we're still learning here in America, that that American Orthodox Christians, converts, or even cradle Orthodox Christians from other countries who come here young, kind of have to get that you can be many things that you're not necessarily um working in. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not like, you don't need to get an income tax for everything that you are. It's more about what you decide to do with yourself at all times, and thought, action, and word. So
Yeah, I'm in. Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
for me, that was a real paradigm shift.
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And eventually you leave Greece and you come back to the States. So I wanted you to tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about the state of your ministry now, and are there any particular advancements or leaps that you plan on applying to your pastoral work in the future?
Hmm. Well, I would say to be honest, it was a rough transition, coming back because, I came back into the Greek Orthodox Church, into the metropolis of Atlanta. And, And to be honest, my brother-in-law and father-in-law were both Antiochian priests, and I had been going to mainly Antiochian churches. When I was received in an Antiochian church, and had been members of Antiochian churches. So I wasn't really familiar with the Greek Orthodox Church, but I had kind of naively assumed that the Greek Orthodox Church was like the Greek Orthodox Church in Greece. And so for me, it was a kind of a culture shock a little bit to find that it's a third thing. It's not American, it's not Greek, it's Greek American, which is a third thing, right? It's not Greek. Um so yeah, there was a little bit of it was hard for me at first, but the first church I went to, like I said, was in Newport Richey outside Tarpon Springs, which is a very Greek area. So that probably helped. That was wise of my bishop to send me there. There was a lot of Greek speakers. There were actually, I remember one woman, an older woman, she'd been in the States 50 years, 50 years, and she didn't speak English, because she lived in Tarpon Springs, where you can go to the supermarket, you can go to the bank, you can go to the post office, and you can
Everybody's
speak
speaking
Greek.
Greek. Yep.
Yeah, everyone's speaking Greek. You can live perfectly fine without learning English. So that softened the blow a little bit. But still it was a little bit of a culture shock, to be sure, about and the expectations of a priest, because I was a priest in Greece for uh 8 years, a deacon for 1 year, so 9 years total. All my experience of being a priest, and 9 years is, a considerable amount of time where you're really like kind of formed after 9 years. And so it was a real change for me to learn a new way of being a priest. In Greece, the expectations of a priest are much less, I would say, because you don't have to also be the mayor of the town. The mayor is the mayor, and you're the priest, right? And then there's like someone told me in the village I served outside Volos, they said there was a saying that in the village in Greece, there are three people who, if they agree on something, then that's what's going to happen. They said it's the mayor, the principal of the school, and the priest. Those three, right? And the priest doesn't have to be all three of those people. He just has to be one, right? But in America, in the typical parish, you have to be all three. You have to run Sunday school and Greek school and uh, manage disputes and all this stuff, which, wasn't in the wheelhouse of a priest in Greece. The priest in Greece, you're expected to pray. That's what you're expected to do. Be in church, serving services. So that was a shock for me, is learning to deal with that.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. When I go there, it's everyone doing exactly the job that it sounds like they should be doing. That's just kind of how the ball rolls there. And I think a part of why things are different here is just, the Orthodox Church in America is young, and America itself is young.
Yeah.
And in saying that, there's a lot of work to be done here. And many are called, but few answer. It's one of those things where priests have to step up to the plate and be an active participant in many parts of people's lives that nobody else is going to be. So, and I think it's to the blessing of the priests that take the extra initiative here. I think there's certainly something to say about that, something spiritually significant, but also it doesn't always have to be that way. And hopefully it won't be. Hopefully we're going to see, like we said before, people just living out their orthodoxy and being active members in the progression of the church and the parishioners without having to take on an official role. And once you have established peoples and families working cooperatively with priests in that aspect, then I think we're gonna see everybody's life get easier and more efficient might be the right word.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I've managed to accept the expectations of a priest here, but while also kind of trying to stay true as much as I can to what I believe is the first and foremost calling of the priest, which is to pray, to serve the services, to hear confessions, not so much the paperwork, administrative aspect, but really those things which only a priest can do, really focus on those things, right? Bible study. And so that's how I stay, what's the word? Maybe sane. That's how I
Centered.
stay
Yeah.
centered. Yeah, good word. Yeah. Is really trying to focus on those things. So we have lots of services here. I'm now in Birmingham, Alabama, and a lot of people are surprised. They say, "Are there Greeks in Alabama?" There's actually a lot of Greeks in
Plenty.
Alabama. Yeah, surprisingly, so but they came in like the late 1800s, early 1900s. It's not more recent immigration. So it's all fourth generation, maybe fifth generation in some cases, Greeks. Um, and yeah, so I think there's a process by which, the priest, me, it learns to change a little bit, and the parish learns to change a little bit and appreciate that, I don't necessarily want to spend all my time doing administrative things. I want to do priestly things.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And if I'm not wrong, you also have experience as a professor. And I want you to talk about your experiences in that field and what about being an educator that's so fulfilling to you?
Oh yeah, I love it. I feel like that's my Hmm. That's what I really love to do is to teach. And so those parts of the priestly ministry overlap quite a lot. I mean, sermons are teaching opportunities, Bible studies, adult education classes, which we have lots of these retreats, and that's what I really love doing is the teaching aspect. And so it really fits nicely with teaching in a school as well. So I teach part-time at St. Vladimir's Seminary in New York, and people say, "Well, how is that possible from Alabama?" It's a hybrid program that's mainly online. And so I've been doing that since 2014. Uh, and then recently, just this year, I started they asked me to teach patristics at a local Christian university here in Birmingham called Samford University, which is a very Christian university, but it's all, mainly Southern Baptists, Reformed Southern Baptists, almost exclusively. So I'm the first non-Protestant they've ever hired, I believe. Um, so but it's been an awesome experience. I've really enjoyed teaching that class this year to people in the only 5 students, so it's a nice size class in the divinity school. So these are people who are thinking about going into ministry themselves in the Protestant world. But the interesting thing is one of the 5 students is now converting to Orthodoxy.
I was just
Uh,
going to ask about that. Glory be to God. I was going to ask if any students there were receptive to the idea of coming over here.
Yeah, and then one other of the 5 has come to church, and is interested, but not quite committed to becoming Orthodox yet. But yeah,
Yeah.
so that's what I like doing. And this year we have we're at that time of year as we approach Pascha where we're going to welcome in catechumens into the church, and we have about at least 15 that we're going to welcome into the church here. So I really enjoy working with them as well.
Yeah. And
Teaching.
yeah, and in the experience of teaching, you've had this vast academic background that I don't even think we've talked about enough to do it justice because I read a little bit of your biography, but how has that academic background influenced your approach to pastoral care and counseling within Orthodox communities? Because I know you spoke about it a little bit before, but it's got to have like a huge influence on how you impact people and your way of doing things.
So you broke up a little bit. My academic background, you're saying, had an influence?
Yeah, like how your academic background, influenced your approach to like, being a priest, counseling
Yeah.
people, stuff like that.
Yeah, I would say before when I first started studying religion back in undergraduate, part of me thought I had been thinking to go to law school. Then I started thinking I really want to study religion, and so I started thinking first before I started thinking of seminary, I started thinking of maybe doing a PhD here in the States in religious studies and trying to teach religion, academically. But the more I saw of the academic theology world, the more I was repulsed by it, to be honest with you. It was, the study of religion in America is very secular, very historical. It's not they're not coming out of a faith background.
Lacking, to put it charitably.
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, most people are surprised to learn that religion departments in the US are probably the highest percentage of atheists, in my experience. Um, so the more I was in that world, the more I didn't like it. But at the same time, I love teaching so much and I love studying. So to me, I have found the perfect compromise where I have these 2 part-time teaching positions that don't take up a lot of time. I just teach once every 2 years at St. Vladimir's and once every year at the local university here. And it's just enough. It's just enough of a foot in the academic world where I get to enjoy being part of an academic community around other people who think similarly and are interested in studying the same things I am. That's really rewarding to be part of that community. But I'm not sucked into it's not professionalized, so I don't have to deal with all the pressure to publish and seek tenure and all that nonsense. Um, so on that, so in terms of my sanity, I think it's been good. Because at the same time, having that foot in another world allows me, is kind of a refuge from some of the things that I don't like about being a priest here in the US, which is mainly the administrative stuff, right? So that stuff I don't really enjoy. And so having a foot in another world allows me to escape a little bit, if that makes sense. So that I'm not just only enmeshed in that one world. So how's it influenced? Well, I would say how's it influenced me pastorally? I mean, it's hard for me to say, but I think probably other people would say that it influences my preaching style. So, I tend to be more teaching, in the sermon, in the preaching, really always trying to educate about our faith, and not just appeal to morality or whatever it may be. Um, and then it influences, what I do outside the liturgy in terms of I really focus a lot of energy on adult education, catechism classes for the newcomers, Bible study. Those are the things that I really spend my time and energy on. Those are the things I really love doing.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And, I feel like that even amongst the similarities between me and you, you in my book now being Greek for all practical purposes,
Yeah.
um, we're kind of opposite in the way that, I grew up with the praxis of Orthodoxy, but not the academics, because it's like, I grew up culturally Greek, so, I was in church with my family. My parents taught me how to pray, the community. And, my young life was always surrounded by the church, but you started from the academic standpoint and then later on inherited the praxis and got to experience all that. So, for cradles like me and all the Greeks that you meet here in America in your life, and even ones overseas, what advice would you offer to individuals who are interested in deepening their understanding of Orthodox theology who may not know where to start?
That's a great question, but I think about that a lot. Um, I especially think in terms of, converts versus cradles, as we're so called, and I've been in ethnic churches, cradle churches, so-called ethnic, so-called, and
We're
so-called.
all converts at the end of the day, but
Yes,
for
yes,
yeah.
and convert churches, and I would say I see a real my parish now, I would say, is a mix. It's probably now, I mean, it's growing more and more convert, like a lot of, like all the parishes, I think, really. But it's probably 60% Greek, 40% converts, spouses of Greeks, people who have no association whatsoever, like me, and just become Orthodox. And I think there's a real value in having communities that are mixed like that, because I think each side can learn from the other. Now it can be a little difficult as the priest, to manage that chemistry, but if you do it right, I think that the cradles can learn from the converts in terms of their book knowledge, because a lot of them come in with a lot of book knowledge, and especially now as there are more and more resources, especially like Ancient Faith Radio, so many podcasts.
What we're
You have
doing here at the Orthochat.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. I mean, I think you have people coming in, especially in the last couple of years. It seems like there's just this flood, and other priests say the same thing. I don't think it's like something I'm doing. There's just the floodgates have opened, especially to like young men. who are really looking at Orthodoxy and have discovered it basically through the internet, through these podcasts and other resources like that. And yeah, it's a great thing, but they come in with all this knowledge, which can be helpful to the cradles who have, like you said, the praxis, but don't really know why. They know what we do, but they don't know why we do it. The converts know why we do it, but they don't really know what we do. And so each one can learn from the other. You know, the converts have a lot of zeal, but like St. Paul says, it's not always zeal according to knowledge. You know, sometimes it can be carried away, especially new converts. And so I think having cradles shows them how to live Orthodoxy in a kind of organic, natural way. And then the cradles get from the converts that zeal and enthusiasm for their own faith, which, you know, growing up with it, I imagine it's quite easy to take it for granted. Um, and like I saw in Greece, I think I felt like a missionary in Greece in some ways, not because it necessarily needs to be re-evangelized, but um, people were just so fascinated with my story. Like they're like, wait a second, you're an American and you want to come here? Like we're all Greeks and we want to go there to America and you want to come here? And you know, just the fact that someone not Greek had embraced their faith, had embraced their culture, their language, and wanted to live in Greece and serve the people, they felt like, you know, it just being there inspired them in some way, you know, not because I did anything, but just the fact that I had embraced their religion really inspired them and made them examine themselves like, wow, maybe we do have something special here, you know. So I think that's what can take place in the parish between the cradles and the converts, is that the converts can make the cradles really appreciate what they have when it's so easy to take it for granted.
Oh, big time. And, I feel like another division between, we're all one church, but the two groups, people that come into the church later in life or people that are baptized as babies or super young, is literature consumption. For me, I grew up reading St. Paisios, St. Porphyrios, St. Theophan the Recluse, and it was all stuff that kind of pertained to strengthening the spiritual life, right? And but when I turned like 16 or 17, I made all these convert friends. Everybody that works for the Orthochat now is converts, and they are so ridiculously smart and attentive and on fire to learn about the more detailed aspects of the faith in its structure. And it's like, when my friends introduced me to the Ambigua, right, or St. Basil's 6 Days of Creation, I'm like, wow, this
Yeah.
is this is a lot. That it's intense. And I'm like, there's so much about this that I just didn't know. And I truly deeply believe that if you start, I guess, young enough, I don't really think there's like an age ceiling on it, but it's like if you start young enough, you can really embrace both. Like you can fully be entrenched in the spiritual warfare with all the advice of, the modern saints who are like Elder Ephraim of Katakania. He's another great one, but Saint Ephraim of Katakania. But if you have that part stacked on top of, the teachings of the Cappadocian Fathers, all these maybe more ancient saints who wrote on the dogmatics of the church, you can embrace both, but some people get it from some sources. And like you said, there's always something to learn between the two sections that they can overlap. And I feel like that creates love. I feel like that creates love and
Yeah.
acceptance, and it unites people in a really funny way. So
I think I love when I see, you know, some parishioners who are, you know, cradle Orthodox, and love when they embrace these converts who come in and they offer to be their godparents, and it becomes a beautiful relationship of, you know, and the convert really appreciates them and pays them honor and respect as being their godparent, and the godparent really loves them like a child or a brother, and really tries to impart to them what they've what they've inherited from their faith, and I think you said something that I always try to emphasize too, is that we're all converts, or that we're all called to be converts. Even if we grow up in the Orthodox faith, there's a certain point in time, like, yeah, when you're growing up, you go to church because your family makes you go to church. But at a certain point in time, you have to decide, I'm going to church, right? You have to make it your own decision at a certain age. And so in that sense, we all have to have that conversion moment where we make a decision for the faith.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, when I was young, I just kind of did it because it's what you do. And I didn't really have my calling to the priesthood until I was maybe 14. And even after that, it was like I was putting it off. I really didn't know what this whole thing was about, nor did I really make a concerted effort to learn. And I ignored my faith in a progressional aspect for a couple years. But when if you're dry of soul, God's gonna dump a bucket on you like the ASL ice bucket challenge. And if you are dormant in spirit, God is he's gonna crush you a little bit. He's gonna break your heart as a suitable sacrifice to him, so he can assist you in building it back up. And then you just kind of go from there. So even for me, I um I I don't want to say I wasn't taking it seriously, but it transferred from this is what you do to I should really be doing this out of my own volition and for a recognition of what all of this means. And I'm Greek, and I grew up around Greeks. I grew up with 40 best friends that were all my age, cousins, distant relatives, whatever. And, the best I could really do for them is just answer their questions whenever they have them, tell them to go get a canona from their spiritual father, and then give them like a book of the lives of the saints for like their birthdays or their name days or whatever. So it's like it's a slower burn for some people than others, but in one way or another, God gives us a million chances to, come to him in a more impactful way. And I think we're all gonna make it. We'll be all right if we pay attention, if we're a witness per se.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. So, amongst all of the other things that you've done, because you've done a lot, you were also an editor and a translator. So I want you to tell us a little bit about your experience in that field, and what
Yeah.
were some of the most beneficial things you've learned working in that area.
Good question. Well, it kind of happened in my translating, it kind of happened by necessity. I was getting support in Greece from some very generous benefactors here in the US, but I needed to earn some more money. And so after that first year where I learned the language, I forget how it started, but I think someone asked me to translate something theological. And I did, and because there was such a need. I mean, there still is a big need, but especially 15 years ago, there was more of a need to get more things in Greek translated into English. And so I felt like at the beginning, it was very hard to translate, but it helped me improve my Greek because I had to go and ask people, like, okay, what's this mean? What's this mean? What's this mean? Um, and I just really enjoyed, like with teaching, translating is another thing that I just really enjoy doing, especially, I mean, really not especially, only theological works. I don't enjoy translating, something else. I've translated some, like, for one professor in Thessaloniki. He's a computer science guy, and I've translated some of his papers, and it's like, to me, it's so boring and tedious to translate because I'm just not interested in computer science. But theology, anything with theology, I'm super interested in, and having to translate it. When you translate something, you really have to understand what you're reading so that you can render it in your native language. Um, and so to me, it's just really enjoyable. So I got to read a lot of really good theologians. Let's see, the ones I've worked with. So when I was ordained a deacon, I was accepted into the metropolis of in Volos, Greece. And Volos has an academy, a theological academy, which means they put on conferences, roundtables, that kind of thing. And so I ended up with the bishop asked me as my duty, diaconima, it was to translate for this academy. So all the conferences where people, it would be an international conference where it was also in English. I had to translate all the Greek presentations, into English. And so that exposed me to a lot of theology on really contemporary topics that these conferences were about. And so yeah, that was really good. And then, so I guess mostly I've worked with, the Volos Academy director, Pandalis Kaliadzidis, who is a very interesting theologian. I work still with Thanasis Papathanasiou, who's the editor of Synaxis Journal, and he's a missiologist, which is also my field, missiology. And to me, he's my favorite theologian, modern theologian to read, who's alive today. Really creative in the best possible sense of that word. Um, and then I translated 100 sermons by Metropolitan John Zazoulis that was just published.
No kidding.
Yeah, and I edited a book of Zazoulis's essays some years ago, and I got a chance to meet him, have lunch with him one time. So the translating has brought me into contact with a lot of a lot of really good theologians. It's helped me grow. I would say, academically, theologically, but also spiritually.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I would consider you a man of academics. This seems to be something you're pretty good at. So I think you'll be able to speak to this better than I would. But what would be your advice for Orthodox Christians working their way through intense educational programs who still want to keep their faith in good order? Not necessarily that they're at odds with each other, but it's a lot. Both are a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, boy, that's a good question. I mean, are you talking especially about students of theology and religion?
I mean, just I got buddies who are, Greek, or I got Greek friends that are in medical programs. I got friends that are
Okay.
going to go be, patent attorneys, or even people that are going to, people who are studying theology it's a little easier for them because, they're constantly surrounded on it. Granted, they're going to get attacked more, but, that's just how demons work. But just
Yeah.
anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I would say especially for students of religion and theology, my advice would be, stay in the middle. The Orthodox teaching is the middle way is the royal way. There's extremes on all sides. My advice would be, avoid the extremes, stay with the consensus of the fathers. Um, for students of in other fields, yeah, I can see how that would be really tough, especially, here in Birmingham, we're right next door to a major research hospital. So we have lots of people come in and out of the parish for residencies. And they have crazy schedules. They work like 80 to 100 hours a week or something ridiculous. Um, and so it can be very hard to have any kind of life, let alone spiritual life outside of your studies. And I would say generally, depending on what school you go to, unless you go to a specifically Christian school, which are not really that many, the university environment is very secular. It's really not, it's really hard to live a spiritual life in that kind of setting. So I think you have to make a really conscious effort and decision to attend church, not just to read. I mean, you're probably burned out on reading from the other subjects, but to live the Orthodox life by attending church, and
Yeah.
getting involved and having friends, especially having friends who are Orthodox that you socialize with, can really help keep your faith afloat during those years.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And we talked a little bit about this already. And I know for a fact that it's different from country to country, like, Greece versus America, for example. But there is a perception throughout the Christian world that academics and mysticism, if that's even the right word, are at odds with each other in theology. Is there any truth to this, and why has this become such a common idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think historically it wasn't, historically in the church and the Byzantine Empire that wasn't necessarily the case because you had great intellectuals who are also great mystics, like you mentioned the Ambiguo, Saint Maximus the Confessor was brilliant, but also, a deeply mystical theological writer.
St. Gregory
Um,
Palamat too.
and
He's
Gregory
right there too.
Palamas, the Cappadocian Fathers, my own patron saint, Saint Gregory the Theologian, absolutely brilliant men who didn't see any conflict between education, academia, and the faith. I think now, yeah, with the way, especially university level education is structured, it's really kind of antithetical to faith in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's tough. That's a tightrope you have to walk. Um, yeah, I guess I would just emphasize, I would emphasize the praxis, and the fellowship with other Orthodox. We try to emphasize that here in our parish is really emphasize like the young adult group, the young professionals group. Um, Try to get them together with speakers and just for fellowship, for service projects. Um, and that seems to help a lot.
Yeah. And I agree. I think, I know that I walk that line every day that, when I would just say if you're studying theology, in a very kind of on paper way, you got to make sure you have your spiritual life in order because otherwise you're either going to misconstrued or you're going to get attacked and you're not really going to know what to do with it, or it could just corrupt you and you could keep going forward with it anyway. And that's a danger that I've almost fallen into more than enough times, and I've seen people fall into. So
Yeah, I
we,
think spiritual father is really important too. I mean, I think when people ask me, what can I do to improve my spiritual life? I usually say step one is get a spiritual father. You know, a lot of people don't have one or don't even know really what it means. But yeah, getting a good spiritual father who can guide you and you can discuss these difficulties with is really, really important and helps us keep balanced, especially when you're studying something as demanding as medicine or law or engineering or something like that.
oh, for sure. And I gotta ask this plainly, but what would you say is your favorite part about being a priest?
Hmm. Oh, it's got to be the services. Yeah, it's
It's
got to be
nice,
the,
huh?
yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah, I can't describe the are where I really feel like I am who I'm meant to be. That meaning in life that I was searching for so many years ago is, realized in the liturgy. That's who I was meant to be. That's who I'm called to be, is that person in the liturgy. Um, so yeah, that's gotta be my favorite part.
I don't blame you. And in your spiritual life and work, which saints and teachings do you see as the most helpful?
Oh, well, my patron saint, I got to pick my patron saint, with the help of my godmother. So I have to say Saint Gregory the Theologian. One person, uh, Constantine Zalalis. I don't know if you know him in
I met him
Pennsylvania.
personally a couple times. He's a good guy.
Yeah, one time he said to me, I forget what the context was, but he said, Saint Gregory the theologian is the only perfect theologian, who never made a mistake. And the more I read Saint Gregory, it's amazing, all the conflicts and debates that were happening in his time in the fourth century, and he always, boom, is always on point, always ends up with the Orthodox position. Um, so St. Gregory, St. John Chrysostom, his commentaries on scripture, as I do Bible study, I lean heavily on him. So those two in particular for theology and biblical interpretation, I would say are really important for me.
Yeah.
But well, I find myself quoting like right now we're in the middle of Lent, and so we're hearing lots of confessions, thank God. And I find myself quoting mostly Saint Paisios. The 5 volumes that published by Suruti of Saint Paisios's wisdom to me are like my desert island books. Those are just gold for me. And so I find myself quoting a lot, like to the point where people are like, "Oh, here he goes again." Saint Paisios said, uh, they expect that from me now. And because I was in Thessaloniki, they kind of say that people who study in Athens, maybe are more exposed to Saint Porphyrios, where those of us who are in northern Greece, our saint was Saint Paisios. And so I really feel a kinship with Saint Paisios in particular.
Yeah. And in Kalymnos we got Igo Sava.
Yeah, who just
And
celebrated. Yeah.
yes, we did. My favorite. And he didn't write much, but he was best friends with Ios Nectarios. So, that's
Mm,
by extension, I read a lot of his stuff. And I mean,
yeah.
incidentally, for some reason, I just grew up reading Saint Paisios. My favorite book is The Guru, the Young Man, and Elder Paisios.
Yeah.
It really gives you a nice kind of contrast between, yeah, there's spirituality in other parts of the world, but it stinks and it doesn't do nothing good for you in the long run. And then, Saint Paisios, he kind of showed him the right way. I got his big green book. It's somewhere behind me. Yeah.
I helped work on the translation of that one.
No kidding.
Yeah, on his life. Yeah, that was a great blessing. I
Yeah,
worked at the monastery here that published it. Yeah.
that's awesome. Um, yeah, and I find great benefit from reading the lives of the saints. It takes me back to Saint John Chrysostom's commentary on the Gospel of Matthew, where he prefaces it with saying, back in the Old Testament times, God would directly speak to people as if he was just as if two people were having a conversation now. And, after the resurrection, we don't have that anymore. So for us to ignore, well, sometimes we have it. Some saints do that plenty, but what we have now is the lives and the teachings of the saints, and if we don't utilize that and take advantage of the spiritual resources we have, it's not gonna be pretty. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
and
we're very lucky here in the States that we did have Elder Ephraim come and bring what my spiritual father at one point was Elder Joseph in the monastery in New York, and he was one of those figures in my life where I feel like he was a saint. He's a saint. And anyway, and he was one of the ones that I went to ask about, should I go to seminary? Should I go to seminary? And he would tell me, wait, wait. And then finally, when I wanted to go to Greece, told me like, okay, well, you should go talk to Elder Ephraim. And so I actually went to Arizona, spoke to Elder Ephraim with a translator at that time because I didn't know Greek. And he gave me his blessing to go to Thessaloniki. And I feel like with his blessing, like everything opened up. He was a holy man for sure. And he also, I remember he gave me his blessing to learn Greek. And so it's like through his blessing, I managed to learn a little bit of Greek.
yeah, I was friends with him for 20 years about. My dad went down to the monastery down there the first time when he was in his early 20s, and then when he eventually married my mom and had me, they took me down there as a baby, and I used to go visit him and hang out with him every year until he eventually passed away. But yeah, he was cream of the crop. He always gave us apples.
Mm,
And he was I really can't think of a more impactful figure in my spiritual life than him. But Tapaisios down there, he's pretty good too. He's very in touch. He's an excellent confessor. So I give him a lot of credit as well. Even though he doesn't like me giving him credit when I talk to him, but I give him a lot of credit. So yeah. And through, with the amalgamation of everything that, you've experienced and learned and done in your life, what would you consider the most impactful moment or experience in your life as a clergyman?
Ooh, boy. Well, the first thought that came to my mind, I don't know why, was a moment in my ministry that I'll never forget. It was down in Newport Richey in Florida, and we had a parishioner who had a 5-year-old son who had neuroblastoma,
Wow.
and and he was a wonderful kid. He used to it was kind of the tradition when I got there that he would run up to communion. So as soon as the priest came out and said, with faith and the fear of God, and faith and love draw near, they would like it was like he was at a starting gate at the entrance at the narthex, right? And like as soon as we came out and said that, boom, they would let him go, and he would sprint to come take communion, because he was so excited about it. And I ended up being there when he passed away at 5 years old, and seeing that and being there with the family, that was something that I'll never forget. Uh yeah, in fact, yeah. So that was something that really impacted me. What else can I think of from my ministry? I've had so many blessings as a priest, a lot of doors open for you as a priest, especially in Greece where there's such respect for the priesthood. Um, just like on Mount Athos, so many doors open for me where I've got to serve liturgy on Mount Athos many times, and um, meet incredible people, venerate unbelievable relics and wonder-working icons, and it's just too many blessings.
I know what you mean. I look back at my life and I've said it before, the things that go wrong could have gone way worse, and the things that could have gone wrong have not, and the blessings that are in my life and in the lives of those I see around me are plentiful, and there's a lot to thank God for. And, on top of all that, I also thank God that He brought you to come speak with us. Father, I can't thank you enough. It's been eye-opening and a joy to have you on. Do you have any final message for the audience, and would you like to end us off with a prayer?
Yeah, I just thank you for allowing me to be here with you. I think it's a great thing you're doing. I applaud you. Bravo for your what's the right word I'm looking for your initiative, to do something like this and to add to, I don't know that this one in particular with me is going to add to anything, but in general, adding to the many resources that are available, especially as we try to witness to Orthodoxy here in the US, where we're such a small minority and there's just so much ignorance about Orthodoxy. So it's really important what you're doing, and I applaud you, especially as a young man, for dedicating yourself to serving the church. And I wish you all the best, and as you progress, and may God's will be done, and maybe someday we can celebrate the liturgy together if God so wills.
I'd love
Uh,
to.
so, through the prayers of our Holy Fathers, Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen.
I mean, Father, I can't thank you enough for coming on and speaking to us. In our next episode, we will be speaking to Father Mark Wisnowski. And at some point, we are going to continue our readings of Wounded by Love, the life and the wisdom of Elder now St. Porphyrios. And with that, Bade, Evkaristo para poli, and to everybody
Bravo.
else, Baragia Mazisu, and we will talk to you all soon. Thank you.
God bless you all. Thank you.
Στους αιώνας των αιώνων αμήν, σεν είναι πηγινός κοαιτία της αυτού, απολύασος μισή ο Θείος μου Υιός, σιγάρ κατάγγισε όλος τη αμαρτία, και παρεδόθης τελείως τη ραφημία, της εξαναστήσης εκείμενο.
Kyrie Iisus Christe eleison, 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 Kyrie Iisus Christe eleison.